Not my woman, huh?
And I would never, ever, ever use a lie. Ain't now one of them niggas stepped up and said they hit this. Use a goddamn lie. What are you saying, Jonathan?
Saying I need to be a mother, not a networker, not a baddie, not a squawker, not a motherfucker.
I'm not about to let nobody in no club jump on my back.
The internet wasn't ready for this, not even close. What started as a few unsettling clips and resurfaced comments has now exploded into one of the most disturbing and controversial conversations surrounding Blueface yet. According to reports and viral reactions online, Blueface's own mother is being accused of behavior and statements that fans are calling deeply inappropriate, crossing lines nobody ever expected to see crossed. And now, the internet is asking a question that feels uncomfortable just to say out loud. What is really going on behind the scenes? For years, fans have known that Blueface's relationship with his mother has been intense, emotional, and often publicly chaotic. Arguments on camera, personal business aired online, moments that made people pause but quickly move on. But now, people are going back and re-watching everything, and what they're seeing is sending shockwaves across social media. Certain comments, reactions, and emotional outbursts are being interpreted in a completely new light, and many are saying the signs were always there. We just didn't want to see them. The situation.
Jonathan?
Saying I need to be a mother, not a networker, not a baddie, not a squawker, not a motherfucker.
I'm not about to let nobody in no club jump on my back over no gate.
I'm about to show you the video.
You have no reason to lie. Don't call me no liar, Jonathan. Jonathan, let her talk because this will be my last time playing with you and your people. Because I don't like how me and her apologize.
I don't care, you're lying.
The situation escalated when clips began circulating where Blueface's mom appeared overly possessive, defensive, and emotionally attached in ways fans say go far beyond normal parental concern. Social media timelines are flooded with reactions ranging from confusion to outright disgust. Some viewers believe the internet is reaching. Others argue that the behavior speaks for itself. But one thing is undeniable. The conversation has crossed into territory that's making everyone uncomfortable, including Blueface himself. What's making this situation even darker is the timing. With Blueface already facing legal issues, relationship drama, and non-stop public scrutiny, this new controversy feels like another layer of chaos piling on. Fans are questioning how much of his behavior, his relationships, and his public breakdowns might be connected to the environment he grew up in. And if these allegations hold any weight at all, they could force people to rethink everything they thought they knew about his personal life. The internet is divided. Some are demanding accountability, some are demanding privacy, and some are warning that false narratives can be just as damaging as real ones. But once a conversation like this goes viral, there's no going back, especially when screenshots, clips, and reactions keep resurfacing faster than they can be explained away. This isn't just messy celebrity drama anymore. This is disturbing. This is controversial. And this is a story that could permanently change how the public views Blueface and his family. And the scariest part, this conversation is only getting louder. The controversy surrounding Blueface and his mother didn't start overnight. It built slowly, quietly, and uncomfortably until the internet finally snapped and started asking questions no one wanted to ask. For years, fans have watched Blueface's family dynamic play out publicly across interviews, reality clips, social media lives, and viral arguments. At first, most people dismissed it as just another example of a complicated parent-child relationship made worse by fame and money. His mother was outspoken, fiercely protective, and often emotionally involved in his personal choices. But as time passed, that involvement didn't calm down. It intensified. Arguments became more personal, reactions more emotional, and boundaries more blurred. Now, with old clips resurfacing and comments being re-examined, social media users are claiming that some of her behavior feels less like concern and more like obsession, a claim that has sparked outrage, discomfort, and fierce debate across every major platform. What pushed this situation into viral territory wasn't a single statement, but a pattern people say they can't ignore anymore. Viewers began pointing out moments where Blueface's mother appeared overly possessive about his relationships, especially when it came to other women in his life. In multiple instances, She publicly attacked his partners, inserted herself into intimate conflicts, and framed herself as the only person who truly knew or understood him. Fans started asking why a mother seemed to compete for emotional priority instead of encouraging independence.
Y'all need to start holding people accountable. This is not funny no more. This is not a game no more. And that was the ugliest shit I've ever seen.
Screenshots, clips, and live stream moments were suddenly stitched together into compilations that spread rapidly online, each one reigniting the same uncomfortable reaction. This doesn't feel normal. While none of these clips prove any literal claim, the emotional intensity alone was enough to make people uneasy, and once the internet senses discomfort, it doesn't let go. The discussion took a darker turn when commentators began using extreme language, accusing Blueface's mother of being in love with her son, not in a literal or romantic sense confirmed by facts, but as a way to describe what they viewed as emotional enmeshment and inappropriate attachment. This distinction, however, quickly got lost as the conversation spiraled. Headlines became more sensational, reactions became more aggressive, and suddenly, a complex family issue was being reduced to the most shocking accusation possible. Some fans pushed back hard, calling the claims disrespectful, defamatory, and dangerous. Others argued that even if the wording was exaggerated, the behavior itself still needed to be questioned. The internet split into two sides, one demanding accountability for what they see as unhealthy dynamics, and another warning against turning speculation into irreversible damage. What makes this situation even more sensitive is Blueface's own history. He has spent years in the public eye navigating legal trouble, unstable relationships, emotional outbursts, and chaotic decision-making. Many fans are now looking backward, wondering how much of that behavior was influenced by the environment he grew up in. That doesn't mean blame, but it does mean context. Psychologists and commentators online began using terms like emotional dependency, boundary issues, and enmeshment, trying to reframe the discussion away from shock value accusations and towards something more grounded. Still, the damage of viral wording was already done. Once phrases like exposed and in love with him started trending, nuance disappeared, replaced by outrage clicks and reaction content. Blueface himself has remained mostly silent on the specific accusation, which only added fuel to the fire. Silence, especially online, is often interpreted as guilt or avoidance, even when it's neither. Some believe he's protecting his family. Others think he's overwhelmed. And some argue that responding would only make things worse. Meanwhile, his mother has defended herself aggressively in past situations. But this time, the scale of the backlash is different. This isn't just a family argument anymore. It's a public narrative that could permanently damage reputations, relationships, and mental health on all sides. And that's where the real danger lies. When speculation hardens into belief before facts ever enter the conversation. At its core, this story isn't really about the extreme claim being thrown around online. It's about boundaries, trauma, fame, and what happens when private family dynamics become public entertainment. The internet has a history of pushing narratives to the edge because discomfort drives engagement. But once those narratives involve family relationships and implied misconduct, the consequences become far more serious. Whether people believe the claims or reject them entirely, one truth remains unavoidable. This situation has exposed how quickly social media can turn emotional dysfunction into scandal and concern into accusation. And as the conversation continues to spiral, the question isn't just what's true, it's whether the internet is capable of handling sensitive situations without destroying everyone involved in the process. As the clips and accusations continued to spread, the backlash grew louder and more chaotic, turning what began as online speculation into a full-scale social media firestorm. Timelines filled with reaction videos, stitched clips, and commentary channels breaking down every word, facial expression, and past argument involving Blueface and his mother. The problem, many critics pointed out, wasn't just the discussion itself. It was how quickly the conversation lost all restraint. Headlines used the most extreme phrasing possible, while thumbnails leaned into shock rather than context. What had originally been framed by some as a discussion about unhealthy emotional boundaries was now being interpreted by millions as something far more sinister, despite there being no verified evidence to support literal claims. In the age of viral outrage, nuance simply didn't stand a chance. A major turning point came when mental health professionals and commentators began speaking out, warning that labeling a situation with such extreme accusations could be dangerous and irresponsible. They argued that emotional enmeshment between parents and children, especially in families affected by trauma, instability, or sudden wealth, is a real psychological issue that deserves careful conversation, not sensationalism. But those voices struggle to compete with the algorithm. Calm explanations don't spread as fast as shocking claims. And once the internet locks onto a narrative, it rarely slows down to ask whether the framing itself is doing harm. In this case, many felt the damage wasn't just to Blueface's mother, but to Blueface as well, who was being dragged into a conversation that questioned his family life in the most invasive way possible. Supporters of Blueface's mother pushed back aggressively, calling the allegations disgusting, disrespectful, and rooted in internet cruelty rather than fact. They pointed out that being outspoken, emotional, or overprotective does not automatically mean something inappropriate is happening. To them, the outrage said more about the audience than the subject, a reflection of how quickly social media jumps to extreme conclusions, especially when it comes to controversial figures. Others went further, accusing content creators of exploiting trauma for views, using exaggerated language to farm engagement while ignoring the real-life consequences. Once reputations are damaged online, they argued, corrections rarely travel as far as the original accusation. On the other side, those defending the discussion insisted that calling out uncomfortable behavior isn't the same as making literal accusations. They claimed the phrase being circulated online was symbolic, a way to describe emotional overattachment and control, not a factual claim of romantic intent. But the internet doesn't operate on symbolic language. Once a phrase trends, it becomes literal in the eyes of millions, stripped of context and repeated without explanation. That's where the line between commentary and character assassination becomes dangerously thin. And as more creators joined the conversation, fewer took the time to clarify that distinction, allowing the most extreme interpretation to dominate the narrative. Blueface's silence continued to be interpreted in multiple ways. Some fans saw it as maturity, a refusal to fan the flames or publicly shame his own parent. Others believed it showed emotional exhaustion, the kind that comes from having your family drama dissected by strangers. And some critics unfairly framed his lack of response as avoidance or guilt, even though silence is often the safest option in viral controversies. In reality, any response he made could be weaponized, clipped, or misrepresented within minutes. Speaking up risked escalating the situation. Staying quiet risked letting the narrative grow unchecked. It was a lose-lose scenario created by the speed and cruelty of online discourse. What this controversy ultimately exposed was a deeper issue with how social media handles sensitive family dynamics involving celebrities. There is a difference between analyzing public behavior and assigning deeply damaging labels without proof. The internet often claims to care about mental health, boundaries, and accountability. But when those topics become trending content, empathy is usually the first thing sacrificed. Instead of asking whether the discussion was helping anyone, most users focused on picking sides, amplifying outrage, and pushing the story further into the extreme. And once a family dynamic is framed as scandal rather than struggle, it becomes almost impossible to pull it back into a responsible conversation. By this point, the story had grown far beyond Blueface or his mother. It had become a case study in how easily online spaces can turn discomfort into accusation and speculation into perceived truth. Whether people believed the claims or rejected them entirely, one thing was clear. The damage caused by viral framing doesn't require facts. It only requires attention. And as the backlash continued to snowball, the real question became less about what people were saying and more about whether anyone was willing to slow down and consider the human cost of saying it. As the controversy kept unfolding, more people began looking beyond the viral clips and into Blueface's broader history. trying to understand how his upbringing, family dynamics, and rise to fame may have collided in ways the public never fully considered. Long before this latest situation, Blueface's life had already been defined by instability, public arguments, volatile relationships, legal trouble, and a pattern of chaotic decision-making that fans often laughed off as just Blueface being Blueface. But now, with his family dynamics under a microscope, many are asking whether that chaos was random at all, or if it was shaped by deeper emotional patterns formed long before the cameras were ever rolled. Blueface's relationship with his mother has always been unusually public. Unlike many artists who keep family matters private, his conflicts with her have played out openly, on reality shows, live streams, and social media arguments that millions watched in real time. These weren't quiet disagreements. They were emotionally charged confrontations filled with blame, guilt, and unresolved tension. Viewers noticed how quickly arguments escalated, how personal the language became, and how often emotional boundaries seemed to dissolve. In healthy parent-child relationships, distance naturally grows as independence forms. In Blueface's case, that separation appeared inconsistent, repeatedly pulled back into public conflict. For some observers, this didn't point to anything inappropriate, but it did suggest a lack of emotional boundaries that can have long-term psychological effects. As psychologists online began explaining, children raised in emotionally intense or unstable environments often struggle with regulation, attachment, and decision-making later in life. When that instability is followed by sudden fame and money, the problems don't disappear, they amplify. Blueface went from a turbulent personal life to global visibility almost overnight. Every bad decision became entertainment. Every argument became content. And instead of being given space to mature privately, his growth happened under constant judgment. That pressure alone would break many people, even without complicated family dynamics in the background. Fans also started connecting patterns in Blueface romantic relationships, many of which have been marked by extreme emotional swings, public humiliation, control issues, and explosive arguments. Some commentators believe these patterns mirror the emotional intensity seen in his family conflicts, not as blame, but as repetition. People often recreate familiar emotional environments, even when those environments are unhealthy. That doesn't mean intent or malice, it means conditioning. And when those behaviors play out in front of millions, they become exaggerated, misunderstood, and weaponized by audiences hungry for drama. This is where the conversation became more serious for some viewers. Instead of focusing on shocking accusations, they began asking whether Blueface had ever been given the tools to develop healthy emotional boundaries at all. Fame doesn't teach emotional intelligence. Money doesn't heal trauma. And internet attention certainly doesn't encourage reflection. If anything, it rewards dysfunction. Every breakdown becomes a clip. Every argument becomes a headline. Over time, that creates a cycle where chaos is not just normalized, it's profitable. And when family members are pulled into that cycle, intentionally or not, the damage spreads outward. Meanwhile, Blueface's mother's public presence added another layer of complexity. Her willingness to speak openly, confront partners, and involve herself in his personal decisions may come from genuine concern, fear of losing control, fear of seeing her son self-destruct, or fear of being pushed aside after years of sacrifice. For many parents of sudden celebrities, identity becomes tied to the child's success, making separation emotionally difficult. That doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it does provide context, something the internet rarely slows down to consider. Instead of seeing two people struggling within a broken dynamic, many viewers reduce the situation to a villain narrative. The tragedy of this situation is that once extreme labels are attached, productive conversation becomes impossible. Any attempt to discuss emotional dependency, trauma, or boundary issues gets drowned out by outrage. And that helps no one, not Blueface, not his mother, and not the audience pretending to care about mental health while participating in online parlance. At this stage, the story had shifted away from facts entirely and into perception. And perception, once cemented online, is almost impossible to undo. By the end of this phase of the conversation, one thing became clear. This controversy says as much about the internet as it does about Blueface family. It reveals how quickly complex human relationships get flattened into scandal, how trauma gets repackaged as entertainment, and how easily concern turns into accusation when algorithms reward shock over understanding. Whether people believe the claims or reject them outright, the reality is that this situation reflects a system that thrives on emotional collapse and rarely pauses to ask who gets hurt in the process. By the time the controversy reached its peak, the focus had shifted from shock to consequences, because viral narratives don't just disappear once the internet gets bought. They leave marks, real ones. For Blueface and his family, the damage wasn't limited to trending hashtags or reaction videos. It extended into reputation, mental health, and long-term public perception. Once a story framed in extreme terms takes hold, it becomes nearly impossible to correct, no matter how much context is later introduced. People remember the accusation, not the clarification. And in this case, the accusation was one of the most damaging labels imaginable, even though it was rooted in interpretation rather than verified fact. From a legal standpoint, experts online were quick to point out how dangerous viral phrasing can be. Even without lawsuits being filed, defamatory narratives can impact business relationships, contracts, and future opportunities. Brands don't like controversy that touches family, morality, or implied misconduct, especially when it's framed without nuance. For artists like Blueface, whose career already exists in a fragile space due to legal issues and public volatility, this kind of narrative can quietly close doors without any official announcement. No emails, no statements, just fewer calls, fewer opportunities, and more distance from people who don't want to be associated with risk. Emotionally, the consequences may be even heavier. Public humiliation hits differently when it involves family. It's one thing to be criticized for music or behavior. It's another to see your parent turned into a viral symbol of something deeply disturbing. Psychologists often warn that when family dynamics are attacked online, individuals experience a mix of shame, anger, guilt, and helplessness. Defending yourself risks amplifying the story. Staying silent allows others to define it for you. Either option comes with emotional fallout. And for someone already navigating fame, pressure, and instability, that weight can compound fast. The situation also highlights how mothers, especially outspoken or unconventional ones, are treated online. Society often holds them to impossible standards, either silent and supportive, or accused of being controlling and intrusive. Once Blueface's mother was framed as crossing an invisible line. Everything she had ever said or done was reinterpreted through that lens. Moments that might once have been seen as overprotective or emotional were now viewed as sinister. This kind of retroactive judgment is common online, where context is replaced by confirmation bias. Once people decide who the villain is, every past action becomes proof. At the same time, some observers began questioning the role of audiences themselves. Social media often claims to be about accountability, but accountability requires accuracy, fairness, and responsibility, not speculation disguised as truth. In this case, millions of people participated in a narrative that escalated far beyond the original discussion, repeating language without stopping to ask whether it was fair, proven, or necessary. The internet doesn't just observe controversy, it manufactures it, fuels it, and then moves on, leaving the people involved to deal with the aftermath alone. Another long-term impact is how this story reshapes Blueface's identity in the public eye. Artists are already flattened into caricatures by fame. The problematic rapper, the toxic personality, the train wreck. This controversy risks adding another label that has nothing to do with music but everything to do with shock value. And once an artist becomes more famous for controversy than craft, recovery becomes extremely difficult. The narrative follows them into every interview, every comment section, every headline. Even silence becomes suspicious. Perhaps the most unsettling consequence is how stories like this normalize extreme speculation as entertainment. When audiences grow accustomed to discussing family dynamics in the most invasive ways possible, the line between concern and cruelty disappears. Future situations become easier to push even further. The shock threshold rises. What once would have been unthinkable becomes just another story. And that cultural shift affects everyone, not just celebrities. It teaches people that boundaries don't matter if attention is involved. As the dust began to settle, one uncomfortable truth remained. Regardless of what anyone believes, this situation illustrates how viral culture can permanently alter lives without ever proving anything. No court ruling, no confirmed facts, just repetition, outrage, and perception hardening into belief. For Blueface and his mother, the road forward won't be defined by what trended, but by how they survive what trended. And for the rest of the internet, the real question isn't whether the story was shocking enough. It's whether it should have been handled that way at all. As the conversation slowly cooled down, what remained wasn't clarity, it was exhaustion. Exhaustion from outrage, from speculation, from watching a deeply personal family dynamic get flattened into a viral spectacle. By this stage, many people had moved on to the next trending topic, but for Blueface and his family, nothing was over. That's the part social media never accounts for. Viral stories don't end when timelines refresh. They linger in search results, comment sections, and public perception long after the internet loses interest. And in this case, the lingering damage wasn't tied to proven facts, but to framing, words chosen for maximum shock rather than maximum truth. One of the biggest lessons from this situation is how easily language can distort reality. A phrase meant by some to describe emotional overattachment was interpreted by millions in its most literal, extreme sense. Once that happened, the story no longer belonged to nuance or context. It belonged to outrage culture. And outrage culture doesn't ask whether something is fair. It asks whether it's clickable. That shift is dangerous because it trains audiences to confuse discomfort with evidence. If something feels wrong, it must be wrong. If it shocks, it must be true. Over time, this mindset erodes the difference between concern and accusation, turning speculation into perceived fact. This controversy also exposed a harsh truth about how society treats family struggles when they happen in public. When private dysfunction becomes content, empathy often disappears. Instead of asking how people got to this point, the internet asks who to blame. Instead of considering trauma, instability, or generational patterns, it looks for villains. Blueface family dynamic, messy, emotional, and unresolved, became entertainment because it was visible. But visibility doesn't equal consent, and public access doesn't mean public ownership. There's a difference between discussing behavior and defining someone's identity based on it. For Blueface himself, the long-term impact may be the hardest to measure. Being raised, criticized, and dissected in front of millions creates a fractured sense of self. When every mistake is amplified and every family conflict is turned into a narrative, growth becomes nearly impossible. People expect accountability without allowing space for healing. They demand maturity without acknowledging how chaos can delay it. And while Blueface is responsible for his actions, the environment surrounding him has rarely encouraged stability or reflection. Fame didn't fix his problems, it moneized them. Outrage feels passive, but it's participatory. And when millions participate at once, the consequences become unavoidable. What makes this story especially uncomfortable is that it doesn't offer a clean resolution. There's no dramatic confession, no definitive proof, no moment where everything suddenly makes sense. Instead, there's ambiguity, and ambiguity is something the internet hates. But real life is full of it. Family relationships are complex. Trauma doesn't announce itself neatly. And emotional dysfunction doesn't always look the same from the inside as it does from the outside. Reducing those realities to headlines may satisfy curiosity, but it rarely produces understanding. In the end, this controversy may be remembered less for what it claimed and more for what it revealed about modern culture. It showed how quickly empathy is replaced by entertainment, how easily language can weaponize perception, and how little protection exists for people whose private lives become public narratives. It reminded us that not every uncomfortable dynamic needs a viral label. and not every story benefits from being pushed to its most extreme interpretation. As the noise fades, one final question remains, not just for this story, but for the next one that will inevitably follow. Are we more interested in truth or in the thrill of reaction? Because the answer to that question determines whether stories like this become opportunities for understanding or just another example of how quickly the internet can tear real people apart and move on without looking back. By now, you've seen how fast a story can spiral when the internet chooses shock over sense. This wasn't just celebrity drama for clicks. It was a reminder of how real people get dragged through viral chaos and left to deal with the fallout alone. If you want coverage that actually slows things down, adds context, and separates reaction from reality, you already know where to be. Tap subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay locked in right here. We don't chase noise, we break it down. Every update, every angle, every detail that actually matters will be covered without twisting it into something reckless. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think social media crossed the line with this story? Or was this conversation inevitable? Stories like this don't end when timelines refresh, and neither does our coverage. Stay connected, stay informed, and keep watching, because the next viral headline is already loading.